Welcome to Mobile Rolling. After the break, I'll be talking to a very special guest. He's been called many things, but I would classify him as a sporting encyclopedia. It's my pleasure to be talking to Bruce McAvaney.
How are you, Gary?
Very good, Bruce. It's lovely to have you on the show. As I've said to most of the people who've been on here, we're preserving some history. A lot of people would know you from the Olympics and football and whatever, but there's probably a lot of people that don't know that you actually cut your teeth in the harness racing game, or trotting, or whatever you want to call it. So let's start from the start, where you were born, school, where you lived, and all your early days.
So Ferryden Park and Ferryden Park School, so that was pretty close to Days Road, so not too far from Reg Norman's stables. Mm-hmm. So when I was a kid, my father would go to the Days Road trotting trials, and they were on a Sunday morning. So this is where Angle Park dog track is. Yeah. So they'd be on a Sunday morning, and the Normans were dominating in those days. They had a lot of very good horses. And I can remember Arkin, who won his first 21 races. So he was, I think he's by Golden Eddie, he also had a Rumba Step. I'm just trying to, a lot of this I've forgotten, but he won his first 21 races, Arkin. So he was an amazing horse, and they had another horse called Merchant at the same time. But so I sort of, that was...
How old were you then, Bruce? Like primary school?
Well, I was born in 53, and I reckon Arkin was around 58. So 58, 59, 60... something like that. So I'm primary school. Oh no, yeah, I'm primary school. So they're my early memories, Gary. So we went to Wayville from a very young age, and it was Friday nights mainly. It would have been Saturday nights a fair bit. So we did a fair bit of going to the trots, as we called it, at Wayville, with Mum and Dad and my brother. My sister would come along as well. She was a little bit older than me. So yeah, look, really from those 60s on, I was into it in a big way. Probably, when I think back now, the first horses, I mean, Minor Derby was before my time, but he was the horse that we all sort of grew up on. Yep. And then there were those great horses like Captain Sandy, who'd won 2 Inter Dominions, and that's when I was basically born. So from that point on, I followed the trots pretty closely for the first, say, 30 years of my life.
Okay, so your parents, Roy and Betty, wasn't it?
Yeah, Roy.
So Roy was in the tax department, wasn't he?
He was an investigations officer, so he wasn't that popular with a lot of people, but he liked his job. He was a guy, but he loved trotting, and so did Mum. And you saw a lot of them there.
Yeah, at the trots, and that's when I was living in Perry. But you then, so when you did high school or whatever, where did you went to high school?
Woodville High, yeah, I went to Woodville High. So that's not far from Cheltenham Racecourse. Mm-hmm. So that was close to Cheltenham. So I went there, and then I left Woodville High and went and worked in the public service for about 4 or 5 years. And really...
like just a clerical job or something?
Yeah. And
so at that stage, what was your interest in harness racing? Did you still go to Days Road and have a look at the trials?
Yeah.
Were you calling the trials at all?
No. Russell Standish used to call the trials in those days. So I got to know Russell. So, no, I wasn't doing any calling, but I wanted to be a caller. I wanted to be a caller from a very early age. It was my dream to be a race caller.
So did you practice at home?
Yeah, I practiced a lot at home. I'd call racing and trotting racing on Friday night. I'd sit on my bed and have the paper, and I used to whip the bed, and I used to do the races before tea and the trots after tea. So, no, I used to love it. And so, yeah, I was practicing from a young age. So I went to Woodville High, as I said, and then I went to the public service, and I got a very lucky break. It's a long story. I can make it short.
No, well, I'm sure they'd like to hear the full story. So go for it.
So a good friend of mine, Kevin Hillier. Mm-hmm. So Kevin,
very astute punter too.
Yeah, Kevin, absolutely, a wonderful man. He and Freddie Jones were big influences on me in those early 20s. So I was going with Kevin to the Kilmore Cup. I took a day off the public service, and we were flying over to the Kilmore Cup, and I sat alongside him in the plane, and we knew each other well. He was calling the trotting trials on a Sunday morning and a Wednesday night at Globe Derby, and I said to him, it's funny, Kevin, I always wanted to be a race caller, and he said, come out and give me a hand. And anyway, after about 3 or 4 months of his encouragement, I decided that I'd take the chance. So I joined Kevin on a Wednesday night and on a Sunday morning, calling trotting trials, and he was given he used to do a little bit of work for 5DN occasionally to fill in for Ron Paps or Ray Fewings or Johnny T, who you'd know well. And an opportunity came up at the Oakbank races, and they asked Kevin to do it. And he said, look, to the guy, Merv Thomas, he said, Merv, there's a young guy who's showing a little bit of promise. Why don't you give him the chance? It's not going to be my profession. So I auditioned at the Gawler Trots one night. So I stood in the...
That would have been a Tuesday, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I stood in the crowd with a tape recorder and the boss standing where you're sitting with all these people around me calling this race or races with no elevation, and it was the most frightening thing of my life just about. But anyway, I did it, and I ended up doing what they asked Kevin to do, and that's call behind the hill at Oakbank for those 2 meetings, and that was probably in 1977. And from there, I was still working in the public service. 5DN said to me, look, would you like to call 1 race on a Tuesday night and 1 race on a Saturday night? We'll give you a little retainer. It was a minimal amount of money, and that's how I got going. Ron Paps then went to Melbourne. About 6 months later, they offered me a full-time job, and I worked as the understudy to Ray Fewings, and that's how it all began.
So how long were you?
That's how it began.
I can remember when I did an interview with Rex Vanstone, he said sometimes he used to sit up in the stand and Roy and Betty would be there and you'd be calling. So how many years did you call? So Saturday night became a full-time thing?
Saturday night became a full-time thing, and Tuesday nights, and I did a greyhound racing as well and some gallops, but harness was number one, or trotting. So every Tuesday night, I'd go to Cadena on a Friday night during the summer season to Port Pirie.
They were the good days, weren't they?
They were great days, and to Port Pirie and a couple of Port Augustas. I've been to... I didn't do Weiler Trots, I did Weiler Dogs, but certainly Cadena did quite a bit of Friday nights. Harold Park was on at the same time.
Port Augusta, were they on a Saturday?
I reckon I did 2 Port Augusta meetings and probably a few more Port Piries. And I did that for about 4 years. It's hard to absolutely recall, but about 4 or 5 years I did that because I went to Melbourne in 1983, and probably about 4, 5, 6 years I did that. So they were great times. I really enjoyed them, and I didn't get to call an Inter-Dominion at Globe Derby, or certainly not Wavell. Carclew was just before me. So what was he, about 76?
76.
And the one after Carclew was that House of Ensel? I can't remember exactly. But so I didn't, which was one of the regrets, I guess. Not regrets, but I would love to have called an Inter-Dominion.
So were you still in the public service, or that had gone? That had
gone.
So you were full-time at DN?
5DN, and I mixed that up, Gary, with Channel 7.
Yep.
So the first job I had at Channel 7 was on a Sunday morning we'd do racetrack. So that was a program on from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And the first 10 minutes would be greyhound racing, and the next 15 minutes would be harness racing or trotting, and the next 25 or 30 minutes.
Were they Gordon Swartz days, or who was running that show?
Not Gordon. No, I was the host.
You were the host.
I ended up being the host. Ray worked on it. Ray Fewings. Ron Paps did a lot of work on it. Graham Fisher did a bit of work on the dogs. Vin Lewis, the racing writer for the Advertiser, and Bert Day did the. So I'd sort of be the host, and they'd be my experts.
So how old were you at that stage?
20. About 26.
So that was
25. No, actually younger, about 24.
Early 80s?
That's late 70s. So about 78. About 1978 that all happened. And then from there I started to read the news on the weekends, just the sports
part.
And then call football. And the football was in the early 80s. I think I did 2 or 3 seasons with Robert Oatey, and the other team was Ian Day and Peter Marker, and that was for Channel 7. We'd do the reserves match, which was live, and then we'd call the league match, and that would always be replayed.
Good skills. Linden to the square. He's really power-driven, that one. Pop that, young Harold. You don't reckon we can... What a moment for Neil Curley. Sacked in 1962 after taking them top in 61, and West 21-16.
So I ended up doing a lot of things there for Channel 7. So I was mixing, really, trotting was my number one core, And from that, I got an opportunity to do a lot of other sports.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So, when did you finish? Do you remember the last time you called a trotting race or a harness racing race?
I don't, and it's terrible, isn't it? I don't, to be honest.
When you went, you were doing the show here for Channel 7.
Yep.
And then you went to Melbourne. Was that with Channel 7?
Channel 10. So I went from and that was because they asked me to do the Olympics.
Which were where?
In Los Angeles. So I'd hosted the Moscow Olympics as a pretty young guy in 1980. Sandy Roberts was working for Channel 7 at the same time in Adelaide. He went over to commentate on those Olympics in 1980, and I hosted the Adelaide coverage each night. So it was a big breakthrough for me in 1980. So I sort of worked on the Moscow Olympics without going there. But in 1984, I had the opportunity through going to Channel 10 in Melbourne to call athletics and do some hosting at the Los Angeles Olympics.
So you actually went to LA?
Yes, it was an incredible experience. It was a great games. The games that changed the Olympics because it was, in many ways, they commercialised the games. They had the McDonald's swimming pool and a lot of that type of thing. The opening ceremony was spectacular. Rocket Man, the pianos, all those things. So they really jazzed it up. Very Hollywood. Can you imagine my luck? So here I am. I'm pretty young still and haven't done a lot really. And I'm sitting alongside Raylene Boyle, who 2 years earlier had won her last gold medal at the Commonwealth Games in Brisbane, that iconic race in the 400. I'm pinching myself.
That's despair. Michelle Scott in bronze, beginning to overtake Jocelyn Hoyt-Smith. It's going to be Raylene Boyle for gold. Michelle Scott for Wales.
And I'm working with other people that were Australian, very good Australian athletes. So I was given some incredible opportunities. So to sit there with Raylene in that first Olympics and call Carl Lewis won his 4 gold medals, and there were Glynis Nunn won a gold medal, and there were lots of Sebastian Coe, Steve Ovett and Steve Cram. So it was pretty amazing, to be honest.
It's interesting because my former business partner, Les Oberlin, his sons were cameramen, and one of them went to the LA Olympics
really?
to cover
Okay.
it, which is chance of a lifetime. You know?
It was an incredible stadium. If he was in the athletic stadium, he would have loved it. So they call it the Coliseum, the LA Coliseum. It was an open stadium. The temperature every day was the same. It was Fahrenheit 90 degrees. Not a cloud in the sky. It was quite sensational. And they had massive crowds. They had about 90,000 people there every day. They only had the one session. They had no night sessions, but about 90,000 people there every day. And it was, the beginning. Well, I'd done the Moscow Olympics in a way, but it was the beginning of a love affair for me for the Olympic Games.
Yeah. And then, so at that stage, then you'd basically severed ties with harness racing or trotting because you then became athletics, and then of course the football, which has probably been your last 30 years of your life, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. 100% right. So football has been the staple diet, of course, athletics through World Championships, Olympics. Did a lot of tennis, did about 20 odd years of the Australian Open and a few other things. I still retain quite a big interest in harness racing. I'd go to Moonee Valley and certainly I was there. I called Per Chevalier's into Domine there. That was for Channel 10. That wasn't live though, that was for the Channel 10 News. I think he beat Village Kid from memory, the two Western Australians. So that was a great experience. And so I still followed harness racing quite closely, and I have until quite recently. And the reason it's quite strange. I mean, you don't think about these things, but I've lost touch in the last 2-3 years, and it's a simple reason for me because there's no harness racing paper for me anymore. So I used to go down to the newsagent every Friday or have delivered the harness racer. So I could always look at the field. So I'd look at all the fields and I'd get the results and follow them, even without not going. But now that there's no specific paper that's available, I've lost touch over the last 2-3 years in a big way. So, and it's not a big part of my life anymore, obviously, but I'm a little sad that I no longer have any input.
Did you race any horses at all, Bruce?
I've had quite a few race horses. A couple have been all right, but harness races, I had a horse called Citizen Kane, who wasn't a particularly good horse. It's about the only horse I raced. I was good mates with Trevor Kelly, who I know you've spoken to on this program before, and Dominic Barbaro, the late Dom Barbaro, and Dom had a lot of good horses with Trevor for a while.
Capo
and Bill's mate, and German Band was around that time. I'm not sure if Dom actually had German Band, but Trevor had a very good stable. So I had a fair bit to do with those horses, but Citizen Kane was the only horse I really owned, and he was a modest horse, but you know, I certainly
Did you drive track work and stuff like that?
I did do a little bit, but slow. I did slow. I used to go out to Trevor's.
Well, you'd be all right on some of mine.
I used to go out to Trevor's property, Trevor Kelly's property in
Penfield Gardens, was it?
It was out near Gawler.
Penfield Gardens,
yeah. And give him a hand. I really enjoyed it, and you'd learn more. I thought as a race caller it was important to know a bit about it.
Yeah.
No, I enjoyed it. It was great, but you know, there were a lot of star horses growing up. I can remember. My all-time favourite horse was a horse called Peter Adios. Now, Peter Adios was he might have been the one.
He stood at the start, I reckon, didn't he?
Yeah,
he was another Norman's horse, wasn't he?
He was Norman. So he's was the fastest horse I'd ever seen at that stage. I mean, he just had this. It was around the same time as Bon Adios. Bon Adios was a better stayer, but Peter Adios had this. He'd never fulfilled his potential, but in that era, it wasn't. They had Bylaw as well, who was a twin. So that was amazing that he was such a good horse. This is how strong South Australian harness racing was. We had 5 horses in the final of the Inter-Dominion in Melbourne. It's probably 1969. I mean, people will know out there, and I'm probably making a lot of mistakes, but we had 5 horses in the final in Melbourne. Bold David won the final. He got a bit of a flying start from the standing start, as it turned out. We had Bon Adios, Bylaw, they were both placed. Adios Court,
Deep Court
and Moonstone Bay, all in that final. So you had Joey Webster with Adios Court and Deep Court. You had Normans with Bylaw. You had the Browns and Shinny with Bon Adios, and Moonstone Bay
was down southeast.
Exactly. So that's how strong harness racing of trotting was in our state at that time. We
haven't had. I think the last horse that was in the Inter-Dominion was probably my horse, Major Crocker, and he never got to the final. He was emergency, won the consolation in Perth. So. And he wasn't even trained. He was trained in Victoria, but you know,
what a thrill for you, though. I mean, so he was an emergency in the final. Yeah,
he was emergency for Miracle Mile as well. So anyway, he's won $1 billion now, so he's in America.
He's in America, is he? Yeah, no, look, a lot of our horses have gone there. So it was an incredibly exciting time. Now, it's a long time ago, I know, and you know, I lived my early life with Wayville as the Mecca. And the track was too small, but it was the ideal location. And of course, the battle with the Royal Agricultural Society, they wouldn't change the contours of the track or extend it. But there was something magical about a 500-metre track. You were sitting all over the top, a bit like Moonee Valley Races. So, and then we went to Globe Derby, and that was exciting for a long time. But obviously now it's struggling.
There's too much. I think because it's so reliant upon the gambling dollar, and there's that much competition for the gambling dollar. I think I mentioned once before on the show that the rugby grand final. I think last year there was 76 bets you could have on that one event, which was the rugby final. So, and they want you to keep rolling your money over. And the days of, you know, quaddies and four trellers and whatever, you know, they're still there, but they're not like they want them to have a bet. You can have a bet on the basketball and then have another bet a minute later on the same game.
Exactly. And when you go back to when we started, you'd place a bet and you couldn't collect it until the next day. But the other big thing that's happened with trotting harness racing is that there was no competition in those days. There was no football at night. There was no other sport at night. Really, it was the best thing to go to. So it was so entertaining. And, you know, it's legendary, the crowds they got at Wayville for years and years and years. And then some pretty solid crowds at Globe Derby Park. So, look, life has changed and a lot of sports have become more the television part of it.
Sky Channel has given the product to the people. So I live at Kangarilla. If I've got one at Globe Derby, to go there, watch it run and go back again is, say, a 4-hour job. And if it runs second last, I think, well, I could have watched it on my... unless it's a special race.
It's very
and I think a lot of people now, it's just, they're actually spoilt, and Sky Channel's brought the product to the people, but it's took the people away from the product. And that's probably what the biggest
You've summed it up well. And look, I often think about the harness industry in the country, not South Australia in particular, but Australia-wide. In many ways, the sport's grown. It's grown internally. It's grown for those that are fascinated with it because prize money is very strong. We know that in New South Wales and Victoria and pretty good in Queensland as well. And WA's always had this remarkable prize money. So within the sport itself, it's grown. So the top trainers and drivers are earning a better living, but it hasn't transcended the sport like it used to. So it's become insular. So within the narrow confines of harness racing, it's the biggest it's ever been. And the Miracle Mile's a big deal. The Inter-Dominion's lost its way a bit. We know that. There's a new race worth $2 million next year. All these things are evolving, and it's great for those people that are closely in the sport. But what it hasn't been able to do, unfortunately, is attract people that have a passing interest, a small interest in it. Horse racing does it through the Melbourne Cup and the Everest and a few other races. Harness racing hasn't been able to do that. And the Inter-Dominion's probably the best example because, Gary, when I was growing up, it was second to the Melbourne Cup. It was bigger than the Caulfield Cup and the Cox Plate. It was the second biggest horse event in the country, and of course it's well
now. They tried to change a few formats and what. Just getting back to what you said about the being insular, you would have thought that with the growth of Mawson Lakes and Parafield Gardens and all of those areas around there, that Globe Derby would be in a perfect position north of Jepp's Cross. You have a huge demographic of people out there, etc., 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 and it hasn't been able to get those people to be even sort of constant followers or even people that go 3 or 4 times a year. And you would have thought that Mawson Lakes, thousands of houses there, and you kick a football and you land at Globe Derby. But, I don't know whether it's not cool anymore or whatever, but they just haven't been able to get those people to come over.
Well, but how do you get them? Because if you, the newspapers are becoming old-fashioned anyway, but let's talk newspapers or online. Is there a harness racing writer in South Australia? I mean, Adam Hamilton's been doing some special bits that get into the advertising, but there's no reporting of it. I mean, the only way you can find it is on Sky Channel or on Radio Tab. So there's nowhere that, unless you're committed to it anyway, that you can find it. So there's nowhere to find it. So you can have all the people living close to it, but they're not going to be interested in it. So that's the massive challenge. Look, it's not a winter sport.
Exactly.
Who wants to go out at night and freeze anywhere? But I'm not just talking about South Australia.
Everywhere.
So when we
go to Melbourne,
and I'm not living in the past at all, but I'm
being a realist.
When Wavell was at its zenith, there were no winter harness racing. It used to always have its launch around showtime. So there was a season. Now, I know that people have to earn a living and they're trying to make a living out of harness racing. In the old days, that wasn't your primary living. You had other bits and pieces, So I think if you could start again in South Australia, if you could start again and have a blueprint, I'd make it a summer season. I'd make it a 6-month season where the weather's good. You'd mix up, I'd have a lot of day meetings, a lot of meetings where it's nice, bright, sunny day and you can go along there and take a picnic and things like that. This 52 24/7 wears you down, and it's just too cold.
We could have. I think Bruce McAvaney could be the racing minister here in South Australia, and we could change that straight away.
I'm good at yapping, but I'm not too good at doing. But look, we've all
that politics?
We've all got ideas, and
something has to change, doesn't it? Because otherwise it won't survive. Look, it'll be a cottage industry. No Whyalla, no Whyalla, no Kadina, no Port Augusta. When you talked about Port Augusta, now Ron Rosie's grandson is the AFL footballer. Now Ron Rosie Connor Rosie. I don't think Ron's son or his grandson have had any interest in harness racing because they haven't trotted at Port Augusta for 20 years.
It's a huge challenge, and the next 10 years are crucial. Because it's at a point now where it needs to find a way to become more relevant. And how does it find its way? I've heard good things about the new administrator, all of those things, but programming is important as well. So how do you create some excitement in the programming of the races? Because, look, if I look in the advertiser at the fields, they're all about the same prize money. They similarly look a similar type of race. I know we have some features, but where's the jump out races? Where's the races that might attract some excitement? Now, I'm not being negative. I'm being realistic. So there are some challenges. I think the next decade's crucial. I mean, South Australia, thoroughbred racing's got everything's relative. They've got major challenges. They're going a little bit better than they were, say, 3-4 years ago. So, is depressing the right word? I'm not going to use that word because I'm not close enough to the sport to, I think, have the privilege of using that word.
It's disappointing, and and you know,
challenging.
It's challenging, yeah.
For sure. Hey Gary, we're just going to leave it for a moment because I'm yapping on so much and it's going to go far too long. So we're going to break this up. Frankie, you behave yourself. So we'll hear from you in about next week. Is that the case? There you go.
Thanks, Bruce.